Good afternoon to you. Mark Sott of HurricaneTrack.com here. It is Friday the 17th of September 2021, and it's time for the Hurricane Outlook and discussion. Hope you're ready for the weekend. Got a lot to talk about before we get there, though. The tropic's pretty busy here as we are in the peak time of the Atlantic hurricane season. So let's get on with it, shall we? First, a tweet from Brian McNulty just talking about where we are in terms of the ACE, the accumulated cyclone energy, how much wind energy has been output by this year's activity so far, sitting at about 124% of the average. And if we don't have anything else forming before the 28th of September, we will go below average, but that's probably not going to happen. So this is a nice graph that he put together showing you the distribution of this, and we are running above the long-term average. We have been ever since the beginning of the hurricane season, way back in May when things got started early. All right, so there you go. Now, what do we have out there? What are the other potential areas? Well, believe it or not, we still have the remnants of Nicholas still sitting down here, not being talked about by the National Hurricane Center per se. Any advisories, this is all handled now by the Weather Prediction Center. Weather Prediction Center used to be called the Hydrometeorological Prediction Center. That's a true story. They really were, the HPC. Now it's the Weather Prediction Center. I guess it's a little easier to say. And they handle any advisories associated with this remnant circulation of Nicholas. Still hanging around in Louisiana. Wow. Just luckily it's fairly dry, relatively speaking, as compared to where it could be. Now we have 96L, which is well on its way to becoming a tropical storm briefly over the western Atlantic. We'll look at this closer in a moment. We have 95L, which is getting a little bit better organized here, and I do think it's going to have a shot to develop somewhere in this corridor right through here and become a name storm. This will become a name storm up here somewhere. Not really too concerned about this system. It's not an invest area. Low probabilities of development with that, as you can see. You never know, though. Maybe it hangs around long enough to become a name storm eventually, but it's way out in the eastern Atlantic, so no worries with that. On the satellite imagery this afternoon, the animation here from Tropical Tidbits. Nice blow-up of convection with 96L. It's got that comma shape to it, all the energy kind of dispersed over a large area, but there is enough of a low-level circulation with convection around it in here that we might get advisories initiated later today. Now let me make one thing, sort of remind you of something. Tropical cyclones don't affect just land. I think a lot of people forget that when they see these different systems named and they start questioning the National Hurricane Center as to why they are naming them, thinking there's some kind of an agenda or a quota that has to be met. You forget very quickly that there are maritime interests, shipping, and I mean, we need the shipping, right? Look at all that's going on in the world with supply chain concerns. You have recreational boaters. You have the surf community that wants to know about any waves that could come along. You have the beach patrol people all along the coastline, especially in the warmer parts of North America, in this case, the Caribbean. And they all need to know about swells, rip currents, and everything is related. So it's not all about you and you're thinking that everything has to be an agenda. It's not. All right? These systems form, and they might not fit some particular textbook definition, that everybody's sort of used to, especially before all this high-resolution, every 5-minute satellite stuff where you can look down and see the guts of the thing. Before that, some of these things would just go by and never be noticed. All right? So there's my little piece for today. That doesn't look like your classical tropical system, and it's not. So if it gets named, I don't want to hear a bunch of complaining that it shouldn't or whatever. If you want to do that, then you apply for the National Hurricane Center director job, and you can change things. But until then, these things are legit. We have better science, better tools to detect them, and the most important thing of all, they do have impacts, not just at land. Duh. I mean, they move from the ocean to the land, and in that between period where they are over the ocean, they do have impacts to interest out over the maritime regions. All right? So there you go. There's 96. Here's 95. Still kind of anemic. It's missing the convection, but it is getting a little bit more concentrated, what little convection there is. There's just this suppressed phase of sort of a convectively coupled Kelvin wave moving through. Just a fancy way of saying that generally speaking throughout this region, the air is more converging and sinking and not allowing for deep convection to form. That's the main thing here. We're not in a very favorable window, and yet we're still seeing these systems try against that intra-seasonal, fairly negative background state. So there's 95. We'll watch this. It's going to move along. We'll show you the GFS in just a little bit. In fact, I forgot to load it. We'll do that in a minute. That's okay. And then we have this other feature back here. Again, kind of dry overall. Not a lot of deep convection, but it does represent a piece of energy, a tropical wave, and it's moving off to the west and west-northwest as well. And then you can still see spinning over Louisiana. There's the remnants of Nicholas. I tell you what, just be done with it, shall we? Hey, look, this is yesterday's vorticity signature. I forgot to delete it out of my tabs from yesterday, which was kind of a good thing because I can show you this. Let's compare where everything was yesterday. There was Nicholas yesterday. There's 96 yesterday. Here's 95L yesterday. Now let's fast forward to today. See how everything progressed except for Nicholas? Yeah. Well, the vorticity of Nicholas actually moved more north, didn't it? Interesting stuff. But here it is today, and we'll take the telestration off. Here's 96L, getting a little bit more focused right there. So I think that's where we're going to see the center of circulation, if you will, with all that convection kind of displaced over on the east, as we saw on the satellite imagery. And then here's 95L, slowly getting better organized, more concentrated as this moves on off. And, if it doesn't get going soon, it could track pretty close to the islands here and bring some tropical storm conditions. That wouldn't shock me. We'll get to that in a minute. But it has taken its sweet time, and you can see down here that it's at a fairly low latitude, roughly at about 13 degrees north or so. And that's pretty far south, so it's a darn good thing. Conditions are not ideal through here, or it would be a problem for our friends in the islands, perhaps more so than what I think it could end up being. Now look, this is really, really interesting. I want to show you this. This is important, and for a lot of reasons. All right, so this is the Anomalies Map. I'll show you this every once in a while. This is a big basis of a lot of what I talk about. And why is that? Because your departures from the average kind of tell you where the energy is located, where the upward motion could be. We know that we need water temperatures of 80 degrees Fahrenheit, that's about 26 Celsius or so, to get tropical cyclones to form. You got to have that warm water. But when the water is significantly warmer than that long-term average here, roughly the 30-year average, you get a lot more energy out there, and a lot more of that energy available to be wicked up from these systems and turned into clouds, and then eventually convective activity. It releases that heat. Condensation is a warming process. All of this warm water generates more activity, usually, and that's the typical way that we go about it, right? So what's so surprising or interesting about this? Well, first, you can clearly see the La Nina look pretty strong now in the eastern Pacific and the central Pacific. Large cold anomaly area right through here. In the Atlantic, I've been talking about this lately, but it has really come to become more prominent lately, and that is this sort of horseshoe look to the warm anomalies in the Atlantic. And this has warmed up quite a bit relative to the background long-term history over the last few weeks. And I went ahead and dug up the wider shot, the whole Mercator projection of the planet here. And on this particular graphic, the Earth is in fact flat. So there's a win for all of you flat earthers out there. There you go. But seriously, if you know what I'm going to show you, if you know, you know, right? That horseshoe look is the classic signature of a warm AMO, the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation. All over the northeast Atlantic up here, anomalies, warmer than average, all the way down in the northeast Atlantic into the subtropics and then the deep tropics. No cold anomalies hanging out around up here near Greenland and Iceland. It's all warm. This is very, very interesting because that is what set off this current era of active hurricane seasons going back to 1995. There's a few years where it dipped, and there was speculation that maybe the AMO was coming to an end, the warm phase of it anyway. Not this year. And I'm going to message Phil Klotzbach and Dr. Klotzbach and ask him about this, and might even see if we can schedule him for another edition of Hurricane U, that little educational series that I'm able to produce. And we kind of talk about this a little bit of a short history of the AMO, what it's all about, and why we are seeing this return this year especially. I mean, it is plain as day. And then what are the implications of this going forward? I'll tell you, for the rest of the season, this tells me that we're going to have a long season on into October, probably November. With all that warm water out there, it promotes rising motion, and it really fosters the development of these tropical waves. Maybe they don't get going out here, but they do get going over here because they stay energized. And then you develop a pattern of stronger high pressure over southeast Canada, and then you lower the pressures down in the Caribbean, and bam, you get a busy October into November, and I believe that is what we will see. That doesn't mean it will happen. Don't mistake that for, it's just like a 90% free throw shooter doesn't have to make all the shots. They could even be 99%, but they could miss 2 in a row. Seriously, this is the look that you would expect, but it doesn't guarantee anything. But it is rather interesting, if not concerning. So what about actual sea surface temperatures? Just taking a look at that this weekend. Maybe you're heading to the beach, anywhere south of Virginia Beach and areas south of there, because north of there, while pleasant, it's just too cold in my opinion. But this yellow area, 26 Celsius, so I already told my kids I'm going to take them to the beach tomorrow evening in the early evening time right there at Wrightsville Beach. Water temperatures will be about 80 and a half degrees Fahrenheit. Farther to the south, though, 27 Celsius, low country of South Carolina, pretty nice down there. So 82, maybe close to 83 in some spots. But the water's still very warm off the southeast coast. Same thing in the Gulf of Mexico, although recent activity from Ida and then, of course, Nicholas has changed things a little bit. This purple area right up here in the Mississippi Sound and up there towards Louisiana, in that area northwest, that little concave area up there, just south of the Mississippi area. Let's zoom in on this map if I can get it to cooperate. This has cooled off quite a bit, now at about 80 and a half Fahrenheit, 26 Celsius, maybe 26 and a half. And then it warms up from there. There's 28 Celsius and then 29 through here, and then very warm southwest of Florida. And then, boy, it really knocked the water temperatures down. Remember, they were all like 30 Celsius all through here. Now that's only, relegated to the areas east of northern Mexico. Old Nicholas coming up here and knocking those sea surface temperatures down. But what does that look like, by the way, on the anomalies map? A little cooler in the northern Gulf. That does show up as cool anomalies. There's the cool swath, by the way, left over from Larry. And we did knock it down a little bit on the anomaly side. It was much warmer, but most of the Gulf at or slightly above the long-term average, even despite all of the agitation that it has endured from recent storms and hurricanes. All right, so looking ahead, furthering my concern, I guess. I mean, be honest with you, it's a little concerning when I show you that in that big horseshoe pattern and the warmth of it. And then you couple it with this tweet here from Andy. And who is Andy, in case you're new? Andy works down at University of Miami, part of NOAA Hurricane Research Division. So Andy kind of knows what he's talking about here, right? So what is Andy saying? The EPS, the Ensemble Prediction System weeklies for upward motion here at 200 millibars seem to indicate that the Atlantic should be generally favored through the rest of September through October, with the standing wave over the Africa and Indian Ocean regions and occasional Kelvin waves kind of moving through. This activity will probably shift towards the Caribbean, Southwest Atlantic over time, which is naturally what happens during the evolution of any hurricane season. Let's just expand this graphic. So these are the individual shots of Kelvin wave energy that the EPS is picking up. And you might look at this and go, what am I looking at? Well, This is the present right here, and this is out into the future, all the way to November. Yes, all the way to November. And this represents rising motion over that time period for this area of the globe. All right, let's take all my drawings away and look at it simpler again. So all of this going forward in time from the present up here to November at the bottom, and it represents this area of the globe. Africa and the Indian Ocean, all green, which is go, upward motion, tropical energy, waves, whatever. That's favorable. This is all sinking motion through here, where? In this part of the globe, when? From the present to the future. And then here is why. This is, gosh, these diagrams, I tell you, science has given us so many tools. This is where we are now. That's not favorable. Where is it not favorable? Right through here. When is it going to be favorable? Coming up with these little shots going through. Then, as you can see, the EPS showing, as we get into October, right in here, this time frame, a pretty robust shot of favorability. Where? For this part of the Atlantic Basin. You see? See how that works? So, not real favorable right now. In fact, pretty unfavorable. A little bit more favorable, and then some back and forth, but then we really get into that burst there of potential high activity as we get into October and beyond. This goes on to towards the end of October, just a small window where it gets maybe shunted a little bit, but this is a big signal as we get towards the end of September into the first part of October, which again, that makes total sense because think about it. These last few years, I mentioned this yesterday, have been busy in October, and more often than not, very busy. Only 2017 that had Nate, 2019 that had, there was a Melda, or was that September? Nestor was our October. 17 and 19 were like meh for October activity, mostly, in the western part of the basin anyway. But boy, 15 gave us Joaquin, 16 gave us Matthew, 18 was Michael. Last year speaks for itself. If you need me to remind you of what happened last year, then I say, where were you? You were hiding under a rock somewhere. And this is the kind of pattern that we look to see, does it come to fruition? And we'll start to see the models, the operational models, which again I forgot to pull up, so we'll do that real quick. There we go. The models, the operationals will start to reflect this as we move through time. And I'll show you, you can just about begin to see it as we examine things going forward. So let's go to the 12Z GFS real quick. That I forgot to preload, but here it is. Here are our players. There's 96L, there's 95L, and some other energy sitting out over the eastern Atlantic, and there's Nicholas's remnants. And let's move this forward through time. You see what happens? Interesting, right? There goes 96, developing, becomes a large ocean storm south of Newfoundland, and off it goes. But this is about 72 hours out. There's 95L down there northeast of the islands. And again, if it's just a little bit further to the south, it will bring some impacts that way. So you better watch out. And it'll certainly bring some anyway by virtue of some showers and storms and a disruption and a change in the trade winds. So we got to watch that. Impacts are impacts. This is 96 hours right there, just north and east of Puerto Rico. And big strong high does in fact build out over the northwest Atlantic right there. You can see it clearly as that system goes up. This is 96 ending up there. Quite the system, isn't it? Kind of helps to create this big blocking pattern of everything kind of getting gummed up. See that? How everything just kind of gets stuck for just a couple of days right there. But there's that system, and it's a good thing this isn't stronger. That's 95L. Hey, this is 5 days out. Maybe it will be stronger. Hopefully it won't, because if it is, this is coming on in and it could create some problems. But it looks like there will be enough upper level energy to shear this. We can just show you that real quick. Right there, 200 millibars at that particular time. There you go. Strong little tut low, or just tut, not the low, but the trough, the tropical upper tropospheric trough. Strong southwesterly winds. Hopefully this is there for the sake of people later on down the road with that system. But what happens? Let's go on out into time, go back to the 850 chart. And I'm just going to show you real quick. I rarely do this because, remember, it's operational, one run, all that stuff. But I'm showing you, watch this area as we get into October. The model's starting to pick up on that other development coming off. See, there it is. Kind of like, well, it's not that much there, Mark. But it's showing the symptom as we go way on out into time. And this does take us to October the 3rd. And we're just about getting into that window there that this is showing us here. All right? So you see, it's all connected. Very easy to spot if you know what you're looking for. All right, so don't forget, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, you know that on the social media side. Finally asked our art department if they would create this little QR code to make it easy for you. The Patreon, I tell you, I was talking to them today on a post. I uploaded some video, a time lapse of the full 18 hours from Frenier Landing over near Laplace, Louisiana, from Hurricane Ida, and just looking at it and how incredibly remarkable it is to see the storm surge come in and all of the stuff we're going to learn from that video, and just reminding people, look, you're the ones that made this possible through the crowdfunding. You know, I might be the face of the band, whatever, the front man, the headliner, but it's a team effort, and we do all that through Patreon. And you can get involved anytime. It's not just hurricane season. We do a lot in the off season. So I asked our art people to make a QR code. Brent helped with that. And then they put this together on our graphic. If you want to become a sustaining member of the long-term project here, again, it's not just a flash in the pan, hurricane season only. We're building stuff that is just remarkable, and we'd love to have you a part of it. And that's how you do it. Just scan that QR code there, and you're good to go. Patreon. It's just amazing, isn't it, what we can do with the support of so many people from around the world. All right, have a good weekend out there. I'll be back, of course, doing updates and working on all kinds of stuff here as we wait and see what happens in the tropics. And then, we'll see. As we end September and get into October, I believe things are going to start to get busy again where it could impact land, and we need to be ready for that. All right, thanks for tuning in. As always, I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll talk to you again tomorrow afternoon.